So I just had a really interesting insight about the relationship between following our calling and the domain of what we might call romantic partnerships, divine unions. You know, I always thought of my career as the most important thing, my mission, my calling. And I like to have relationships, but in my mind, it wasn't like totally necessary, unless it was a relationship that was supportive to my calling. And I just remembered when I got a divorce back in 2013, it was a year after I discovered this thing called the voice code, a big blessing for the world that I've been seeking to bring to it, which wasn't as easy as I thought. But I remember once I had that really big mission, it shined light on my current life. And I realized that I had a need in order to achieve that goal that wasn't being satisfied within that relationship. It came to me in very specific language. I need a woman who cherishes me as a man to pull this off. And it wasn't like something I wanted. I needed it. Like, you can't grow this tree in this pot. And so I remember I asked her, do you think you could help me meet this need? She said no, which is great. Honest. And then we separated. I went on this journey that was just filled with these recurring patterns of two-faced karmic women who really mirrored my mother's two-facedness. Sweet on the surface, and then really witchy underneath, like literally doing black magic. In a lot of these relationships, there were dreams beforehand, and there was this sort of dreamy kind of astral influence and a strong sexual bond. They seemed like they might cherish me at first, but then, after the love bombing phase, things got dark. I finally extracted myself from that pattern for good with my last karmic entanglement. And I now feel free and happy. And interestingly, a couple months back, it was like I downloaded my divine partner inside, and we were already married. And I'm just like, hey, man. So I actually feel married. I feel like I have that partner who cherishes me on the invisible realm. And I'm sitting back looking at the patterns and realizing that, like, without this inner union and this knowing, I wouldn't be able to follow my calling. I'm following it now. Things are getting great. But it was that inner union that all those karmic interferences were trying to stop me from. Because once you get the inner union, the outer union follows. And that's usually when all the inheritance at the physical level happens. So we have a spiritual inheritance, wealth, and then we have like worldly wealth. And they join through the heart, right? And so that's what these divine partnerships are about. That's why the dark is fighting so hard to prevent divine unions. As I got into this, I was like, why do they care so much? I finally understand why they care so much. And I've got a real interesting story to tell about my own karmic family and their role preventing mine. It's fascinating to me because when you look at things at a soul level, it starts to make sense. Souls come here to play one of two teams. They play what in the book The Law of One they call service to others path, which is the path of the light. And it's one of wanting to connect with the light in others. And we have to learn how to love ourselves first. It's that inner union. Until then, we get tricked by the dark with their pity games, and that's how they lure us in. On the dark side, which is a legitimate path because it catalyzes us to move forward on our light path. Now, once we're done with karmics, we don't have any use for it, but it exists for a reason. Their thing is what in that book they call the service to self path. And that path is all about loving yourself, you might say, but taking from others in order to do it. And what we call narcissists and karmics, that's what they do. And they have their own spiritual hierarchy of darkness that they're looking to climb. A lot of these secret societies, and that's what lures them in. For example, my ex got lured into the Masons, might have been the Eastern Stars, with this promise of, initiation and climbing this hierarchy. It solved some of her financial problems. And they bring people like Jay-Z and different people who've climbed that hierarchy pretty high with money and clout to lure them in. And then through that, they get them to try to sacrifice, and destiny swap a person who plays for the other team. And that's their game. The challenges that she brought to me were great. It was exactly what I needed to kind of clear up my earliest childhood wounding. But what's crazy about it is that I just saw the math of how an entire soul group associated with my karmic family, deep roots in the CIA and satanic ritual abuse, that group I was born into worships Moloch, my least favorite demon, because Moloch feeds on children and innocence, and they're bound to it at a soul level. And so they got to keep feeding it. So there's that aspect to the dark too. They don't always want to do bad, but they have to, because they've enslaved their own sacral, their inner child, to a demon. So if they don't do that, they're going to get eaten. No reason to stay with them if they're of the light, but just understanding that's where they're coming from. I mean, they got an urgent drive. It's a reptilian brain drive. That entire soul group, I believe, was directed by that intelligence, which is on a higher dimension. So they can see timelines. They see the frequencies, they know the prophecies and the possible timelines where there is that divine union. When we start lighting up, like when I started lighting up in 2012, they see the timelines and they send in agents to try to get me on lower timelines to trigger my core wounds. And I put up with this for years, but eventually I did the shadow work and I was cleared. So now I'm on that victory timeline, and I know that. I have the faith to know that because I don't have a lot of doubt anymore, because that was uprooted. But what's interesting is, I think my brother, first of all, is the karmic partner who had been dating the ex I met long before I met her. She matched a profile of my mom's shadow, which is why I was kind of attracted to her too. So my brother is playing with my mom. It was all planned out. And they did all kinds of spell work and dream infiltration to make sure that we'd meet up. That's what I think. And then, whether it was the higher intelligence guiding them or whatever, it was time to strike. And they worked their butts off for a couple of years, and they got a little bit of a sacral flow. And the idea from their point of view is that if they can get that sacral flow going, not only does that help with the family business of sacral harvesting, I believe his destiny at a soul level, whether he knew it or not, was to befriend me long enough until the time came right. Then to be able to, bam, do some rituals and take my throne, take my spiritual throne, and whatever gifts I have. And I never knew he was competitive or envious of me that way, except in childhood. But I think that's because he really learned how to hold the face of being a nice guy as part of the mission. And then when the time was right, the soul got activated and he went dark, which I saw back in 2020. I think that was when the shift happened for a lot of people. On the other end, I believe that this same clan, Landsberg, sent in a karmic, I think it's my cousin, to kind of mimic whatever I would be doing, or divine partner, and entrap her in different ways as well. And I think that feeds up through my uncle on mom's side, right? And it all kind of like works through the Masons, and it connects there at the deity Moloch. And that's why there's all this child sacrifice stuff that I've been talking about, harvesting, sex trafficking. That's the nature of this particular beast. And that's also why me growing up in a family like that is why I'm so against it. Because they did that shit on me, right? The destiny of my highest timeline was here when I was born, just as yours is and everyone else is, you see? And so the whole thing plays out to a certain point of light versus dark. And we, by achieving union inside, our divine union inside, can relax and let God take care of the rest. Because if we achieved it inside, we just have to hold that. And all they can do is try to poke us and think that we're going to go back into the ego and fall off of our timeline. There's literally nothing else they can do once we're imperturbable. So the moral of the story is it's already accomplished, celebrate. But only after you've let go of those karmic lessons. And I'll help you however I can.